Greetings and salutations. It is I, Mr. Nothing, the museum curator of the weird and the strange, and the host who might be a ghost. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all manner of strange and unusual literature that I have found in my travels. So today I wanted to talk about a book that I recently read on my Kindle. I don't have a physical format to show you right now. It is about fairies, teenage masterminds, or adolescent masterminds, and trolls. It is Artemis Fowl by Eoin Colfer. Eoin Colfer has written a number of other books, like The Supernaturalist, which I recommend, and Wishlist, which I want to read again. It's about a struggle between heaven and hell, and I really enjoyed it when I read it in high school, but I'd love to read it again just to see if it holds up. Which is exactly why I read Artemis Fowl. One, I wanted to see if it held up. I read it in high school and then again in my undergrad, and I enjoyed it. And so I wanted to see if it held up. And then I also read it because the movie recently came out. Disney's version of Artemis Fowl, which they put on Disney Plus. I wonder if they would have released it to the theaters. That's an important question to ask. So yeah, I wanted to talk about a little bit about the summary of Artemis Fowl, some analysis with what I noticed, and talk a little bit about the movie, which I want to rant about. So Artemis Fowl focuses on the titular Artemis Fowl II. He comes from a long line of criminals, just crime people, I guess. It's been said that like every one of the Fowl men have done crime, and they only just recently went legitimate crime, white collar crime. Artemis Fowl I was set to start selling soda in Russia, but the Russian mafia wasn't having any of that, so they sunk his yacht that he was sailing on, and so it's up in the air about where Artemis Fowl I is, and Artemis's mom is kind of in a fugue state, so she's in no position to really parent Artemis right now. But luckily he does have Domovoy Butler, who is a Eurasian butler who comes from a long line of bodyguards who have protected the Fowl family and helped them in some way with their illegitimate businesses. So that's Butler, and then he has a sister named Juliet, who shows up more later on in the series, but she's kind of two-dimensional in this book here. Yeah, so the book starts off with Artemis meeting with a fairy in a sewer system. The fairy's kind of out of their mind, drunk as it is, and they end up giving Artemis the Book of the People, which is sort of like a fairy handbook. And Artemis uses that to come up with a kidnapping scheme. Meanwhile, while all that's going on, Holly Short, who is a fairy pixie leprechaun of sorts in the lower elements, the sort of fairy underworld. She is a police officer. She's the first female officer, and she's given a hard time by her Commander Root, who's kind of the stereotype of the hard-ass police sergeant who is always pushing you and trying to get you to follow the rules. So that's Holly is tasked with taking down a troll in Italy, which she does. She manages to take it alive, which doesn't happen very often for the fairy folk, so they get to experiment with that troll. However, in taking down the troll, Holly reveals that she hasn't replenished her magic in a while, so Commander Root orders her to go to the old country, Ireland, and replenish that magic. And while she's over there trying to do it, Artemis Fowl captures her, and because she has the radio on, the lower elements police notice that she's been kidnapped and become aware that a human has kidnapped a fairy, but also seems to know their secrets. And so he takes Holly back to the Fowl Manor, keeps her in the basement in a jail cell, which Holly can't free herself from because she doesn't have her magic. She was never able to complete the ritual. And meanwhile, Butler manages to hide her tracker on a whaling ship, and when Commander Root arrives there, like, Artemis makes it so the boat explodes. Luckily, Root is able to get free, but he's slowly discovering that Artemis kind of gets their secrets, and they don't really they're underestimating this small child. So back at the Fowl Manor, the fairies pretty much figured out where he lives, so they set up a perimeter around the estate, and they set up a sort of time dome. It's not very well explained in the book, and it seems like it's a weird sort of MacGuffin, not a MacGuffin, but like a handy tool that only shows up once in the series and then is never mentioned again. So yeah, it basically stops time within the bubble, but outside, and nobody can escape. And outside the bubble, like, the world is still going on. No one's noticing Fowl Manor for the time being. They have a limited time, and the Council of Fairies that pretty much says after that time expires, you have to blow up Fowl Manor using a biobomb that only kills life forms and that doesn't destroy anything else. So the fairies set up a perimeter. Commander Root sends a squad of fairies to track down or take down or make their way into the manor and take down any guards. Butler shows up, and the fairies think, "Oh, well, he can't see us because we're shielded, we're invisible." And in one of my favorite moments of the book, Butler actually is wearing Holly's goggles, which allow him to see the fairies, and so he takes them all out, and it just completely embarrasses the fairies. And so at that point, Commander Root is just like, well, if he knows our book, if he has our strategies, I have to do something to stop him. So he meets with Artemis, and Artemis is just like, I want gold. Give me that gold, and you can have Holly back. And Root doesn't want to do this, so he breaks a rule, and he sets a prisoner free, Mulch Diggum. He's a dwarf. He eats dirt so he can tunnel under foundations. It's really weird, and it's one of the reasons why it doesn't translate well to a movie, because he's literally farting out rocks as he's digging, and nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to read that. It's just, it's weird. So Mulch manages to tunnel underneath the foundation, and he helps steal the fairy book, the Book of the People, and also manages to help Holly escape. Holly has regained her magic by this point because she was able to sort of dig into the foundation and plant an acorn. So things aren't turning well for the Fowl boys, or the Fowl family at this point. Because Holly is sort of free at this point, the council has decided that they want to set a troll loose on the Fowl Manor, basically destroy all the people, and they won't know about the fairies anymore, and that'll cover their tracks, and they can take down the troll. And again, in one of my favorite chapters of pretty much any book, like, they set the troll loose in Fowl Manor, and it breaks everything. It destroys everything. It almost kills Butler, but luckily Holly is able to use her magic to save Butler, and then Butler proceeds to kick the troll's ass in an amazing series of events. So with nowhere else to turn, the fairies end up just giving Artemis his gold, and they plan, because of the way he phrased it when he asked for the gold. The fairies are like, okay, we'll give him the gold, and then we'll bomb the manor, and then he'll die, and we'll get the gold back, and no harm, no foul, so to speak. So at that point, Artemis is like, Holly is pleading with Artemis, like, don't do this. They're gonna kill you. Don't take the gold. You have no way to escape this time field. No fairy has done it before. And Artemis figures that, like, he's pretty sure of himself that he knows how to escape it. But in the last minute, he makes a deal with Holly. Like, if you cure my mom of her fugue state, I'll give you half the gold back. And he ends up doing that. But they still end up bombing the manor. But at the last minute, Artemis has Juliet and Dumblevoy Butler. He has them take or drink champagne, which is laced with a sleeping pill. And so they fall asleep, and then the fairies try to re-enter Fowl Manor after the bombing happens, but they discover that they can't because Artemis is still alive. He may have, like, phased out of existence, but he's still there. He beat the fairies at their own game, because by falling asleep, that transported him out of the time field. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but he clearly outsmarted the fairies, and so they let him keep the half of his gold. Because that is, in their book, they have to follow that. And then the book sort of ends with Holly kind of swearing vengeance, noting that one day she'll be back to take down Artemis. That was Artemis Fowl, one of my favorite books, just because of the magic involved and the action. It's essentially a siege story. Done pretty well. Like, I read a number of books that have sieges, like police procedurals, but they don't do the siege very well. It ends up just being people standing around talking for 300 pages, and that's not fun. But Artemis Fowl does it pretty well, because they keep the action flowing, and you want to figure out how this petulant little punk ass kid is gonna outsmart the fairies, and I thoroughly enjoy it. I also want to note that the troll fight chapter specifically is one of the best that I've read. Specifically for, like, you see the troll earlier in the book. It's the same troll from the one that Holly fought and gave her a hell of a fight. And if she can't defeat it, and she's magical, what's going to happen to Artemis, Butler, and Juliet? They can't handle that. And so you see, like, Butler getting his ass kicked, Juliet almost getting killed because she wants to wrestle it because Holly has mesmerized her. Holly can't even take down the troll again. And it takes Butler getting healed, which won't be the first time he gets healed in this series. It takes Butler getting pretty much healed and completely rewired internally for him to be able to defeat the troll. And even then, Holly makes him stop and makes it so he doesn't kill the troll, because Holly cares about nature and whatnot. Because Artemis is a child, I like how there's this dynamic between whether or not Artemis is really a mastermind, or if he's just simply a child who's out of his elements. Because he sets us up all so wonderfully. He has a plan for everything, a contingency for everything. He even words, like, his demands specifically so the fairies can't work around them. And it's like, oh wow, this small child, this small Irish child really knows what he's doing, and it seems like he's going to outsmart the fairies. But there are several times where it shows that he's just a kid who's out for, like, seeking out his self-interest, seeking out what might make other people's lives better too. Because he cares about his mom, he wants her out of that fugue state, and it clouds his judgment at times, and he's like, I can't be thinking about this. I need to think about the mission here. And also whenever Holly like beats him on the nose or something like that, like just bops him, he's like, oh, you hurt me. And so he whines like a child. I will also say that I love the dynamic between Holly and Artemis. Not so much that I think they should be in a relationship. There's a lot of great chemistry there, but like how they serve as a foil for one another. There's a lot of people on the internet who are like, hey, Artemis and Holly are good for a relationship. No. One of them is a fairy, one of them is a human. No. Personally, I think that they work great as like bitter rivals of sorts, but like ones who will work together to accomplish what they need to set out to do. But I'm missing the point there. Artemis, like even at the end, Holly's like, are you sure you know how to get out of the time field? If you do not get out of the time field, you will die. Sorry, kind of shouting that right there, but like, it's key that he gets out of the time field. She's slowly growing to care, if not about Artemis, about Butler and about Juliet. So he wants them to survive. And so it's like, does Artemis really know how to get out of the time field, or was he pretending and like he's in over his head? Ultimately, it's shown that he knew what he was doing, but only by luck. So that's something that I really like that Colfer really touches on there. I also like how there's this a lot of talk about breaking rules and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable during this siege, during all of this, because Artemis breaks a number of the rules by getting the fairy book, so he has an advantage over the fairies, and the fairies have protocol too, which they see as making them better than the humans. But as Colfer kind of shows throughout the book, are the fairies really better? Because they're prepared to use a bomb that'll pretty much kill Artemis and his family, just to prevent their society from leaking out, even though they have the mesmer, which could make it so Artemis doesn't remember any of this. And in future books, like, they use the mesmer, so why did they even need to use the biobomb on him? And if not to just be cruel and get revenge on this human for, outsmarting them along the way. I do think that it's interesting how, like, the fairies try to paint themselves as sort of high and mighty and noble, and sort of driven underground by the humans, but maybe they just lost the war. Who knows? Like, they were just on the losing side, and they're just as vicious as the humans. It's really up to interpretation there. Last I want to talk about is the movie. I did not see the movie. I actually saw the trailer, and then I saw a whole bunch of like Twitter threads and clips from the movie that showed that it was kind of bad. When I saw the trailer, I just figured, oh well, maybe this movie wasn't made for me. But then I saw, like Rotten Tomatoes score and whatnot. And I know you shouldn't base the movie off Rotten Tomatoes, but it really seems like people do not like this movie. I found it interesting that they made Commander Root Judi Dench, who is a woman, and it's interesting because Holly Short is supposed to be the first female officer in the LEP, the Elven Police Force, which, like, that seems like an important part of her character. I mean, it doesn't pop up too much in this book, but, like, it's weird how Disney did that. And then they made Butler black. Like, Domovoy Butler, like, is described as Eurasian, and I don't have a problem with him being black, but, like, you're applying diversity in all the wrong ways. Like, it's right there for you. Like, do you not see Disney? Like, I can go on a rant forever about all the mistakes Disney made here. One thing I will note is that this book has been this movie was in development hell for years. I remember back in 2009 being excited that they were in the process of making it, but they never got around to it until now. And I think it's just interesting how Disney didn't release this until they had had the Disney Plus platform, which makes me think that they never intended to release this, and they only did it because they needed content, and so they just released the worst possible product because it didn't matter. I'm just a little frustrated because Artemis Fowl writes itself. They didn't even stick to the plot. They introduced Opal Kobe despite the fact that Opal Kobe doesn't show up until like the second book. So, I'm just a little frustrated. Anyway, that's enough ranting for now. I definitely recommend you go out and find this book. It's one of my favorites. It's a great siege story. It's a great story of magic. And Eoin Colfer is a great writer, and he only gets better as the series goes on. So if you can find it, definitely read it. That's all I have to say about the book for now. In the meantime, have fun in your weird travels, and goodbye.